Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Friday, which means it's time for a new How to Bass. And today, I'm going to show you how to make this sound. This is actually born of a hilarious discovery that I made recently when I was doing a lesson with a student who wanted me to make this sound. This was a Skrillex sound. I'm assuming Skrillex made this sound. I don't actually know because this was from a track that had Skrillex, Diplo, and Snails, and I think someone else on it. There's a lot of people on the track, so it could have been a lot of people. But why I find this hilarious is because upon my initial when I heard it, like I do a lot of times, I assume a sound like this is born of FM. And there might be a way to do it with FM, but as I was looking at the spectrum of I basically did a 40K style. Like I recorded the sound, I looked at it, I was analyzing it. And like this sound, I noticed that if I looked at the spectrum, like we're doing right now, we can see something kind of peculiar about the 500 hertz range. We see that a lot of this stuff is centered around three particular harmonics. There's a whole bunch of other crap going on, but those harmonics are like the big part of what's happening. Now, I thought about the sound for a second, and then I remembered another sound that is some kind of similar, where you have a sine wave and then a higher pitched sine wave together, and then you distort them, and then that's the sound. I realized it could literally just be those three harmonics distorted together with a filter. And I did that, and I'm like, yep, that's what that is. This isn't exactly 100% on point. There's a lot of things you can do to this actually to kind of change like the feel of the sound and how and like that kind of thing. And I'll actually show you some examples of that when we're looking at how to make this. I also included the sub inside the citrus. This is all actually inside a citrus patch and then being compressed together. However, it doesn't sound that different not being compressed. This is what it sounds like without being compressed. The mids are obviously a lot clearer and more present with the compression, but that's not really a super huge difference. And then here's without the sub. And with the sub. That's just there. I think I put in one tiny little extra harmonic that would typically be present in a square wave. But that's just little bits there just to give it a little extra sort of tooth. You can kind of see it slightly there. It's a tiny bit there. Anyway, what's happening is that operator 1 is just those frequencies. I don't particularly know if the frequencies that I chose were the ones that ended up being the case, but I did. There were reasons why I chose these three particular harmonics. These guys. I'll turn it down a bit because it's probably loud. I chose these harmonics because they are square wave harmonics. These particular, and I am calling them harmonics and not just tones because they are, I'm playing the note that I built this around, F sharp. It's still, as you see, they're all still tuned relative to each other. So that means that this is actually just a harmonic of the fundamental, which just isn't there. We're replacing it with the sub. But they are harmonics of that tone altogether and with the ratio. But these harmonics, if I did a square wave, these harmonics would be present in the square wave. And I determined this by coming in here and using the lock harmonics, and I locked even because odd harmonics. Did I do this wrong? No. Or maybe I did. But regardless of whether or not I did it correctly to the fundamental, I did it correct to each other, which is to say that they are not, they are evenly distributed against each other. Because in saw wave harmonics are right next to each other, like this. Very right up in there. Square wave harmonics are every other, like so. So if I were doing, here's the first few harmonics of a saw wave. You can even see it starting to slant a little bit. And then here's the first few harmonics of a square wave. Every other, like so. It removes every even harmonic. So if I were really trying to do this smartly, I would have put this in such a way that it would be, only the correct either or. However, they are still evenly distributed from each other. And I took it a step further and then removed the middle distribution of harmonics as well. And the reason why I did this is because the sound had a squarey kind of feel to it, which means that the harmonics were kind of far apart. But then also, when you distort these harmonics, you get these harmonics. Like if I had just this harmonic and I distorted it, I would get the square harmonics, because that's what happens when you distort a sine wave. So that meant that if this one harmonic here is being distorted, it would get these harmonics, and if this one's distorted, it would get this harmonic, and this one's distorted, it would get this harmonic. So that meant that while these harmonics together are influencing the sound, they're not adding intermediary harmonics, which would cause it to sound saw-ish, because it would have the extra bite of there being closer harmonics. They're still going to be spread evenly as if it were the square type. It's just that I happen to be a harmonic off from what F actually is supposed to be. And then that goes into filter 1, which is bandpass. A very, very high resonance bandpass, which is to say that it's actually, if I were to look at this with the EQ, it would look like this. Very small tab like that. Yeah, that's just what that does. And then the next it goes into next, which is what this filter does, and goes into filter number 2, which does nothing. It initially did a high pass, and I was doing some stuff with it, and then that's not what I need to do. But I'm using it as a wave shaper because there is wave shapers built into Citrus. So then now it's being distorted, and you might see that I also have this other guy going into at filter 1, and this is actually just a saw wave up at 8, which is 2 octaves higher, yes, than the actual F that's supposed to be. You can tell it's 2 octaves because the ratio in ratio pitch world, 1 octave higher is twice the ratio, 1 octave lower is half the ratio. So twice this ratio would be 4, and twice that ratio would be 8. So that's 2 octaves. I did that to kind of get some extra bite. It's not super necessary. Like if I didn't have that in there. It's cleaner, obviously, without it. Which you might want. So, like, if you want it to be cleaner, then get rid of that. But if you don't want it, if you want that bite back in there, that's what that's for. And it's up at 8 because I just thought it sounded cool like that. If I brought it at 4, it kind of blends too well. And if I put it at 2, you can actually start to hear it like it's the bass, because 2 would be the bass level. 8 sounds kind of bitey. If I could also do 16, but then that would actually be an octave higher than everything. So that's sort of why I settled on 8. There was one extra thing that I did in here with this that's not in the final version of this, where I actually stuck an octave higher sine wave into the distortion into the filter 2 here, which did that. Now remember what I said earlier about that really common sound that is a sine wave and a higher sine wave. If we're talking about square wave harmonics, and if I did a lower version of the saw, or a square rather, you get that. But if I did an extra higher one, rather than being really, really clear and as a second harmonic of the series, it still adds to the high level space, every other kind of thing. Because remember, this is like square 2 in terms of like density. And what I mean by that is that original square density is every other. And so that means if I were to go even higher than that, then the density would be every other. So that if I wanted to keep up with that distribution and not interfere with it, then I would have to in turn have a sign involved in there that was 1 more octave higher. And again, wasn't a sound that I wanted. I wanted it for the final, so I didn't have it in there, as I did the saw wave kind of thing. I also have this distortion going on with some reverb. Sounds kind of crunchy, but whatever. Could make it longer if you wanted to. That crunch actually has more to do with what's happening in the compressor, because it is actually doing something kind of interesting. I'll show you that in a second. And then the last filter, because then it goes into the next filter. So this filter is essentially a series filter. So it's going into filter 1, into filter 2, into filter 3, and then out. That's up with that. This is a high pass filter, which I was initially using to cut it off to right below the 500 hertz range. I, however, discovered that it was not super necessary, but I did still put that in there just because that was routing and just turning it off didn't really change anything. So that's what was up with that. Remember, the sub is bypassing all of that. So now let's talk about, I am also doing, I have two voices of unison, and I have the panning a little bit, but notice every other parameter is off, which would normally mean that nothing would happen. However, what I'm doing is in operator 1, I went into pitch, I went into unison index mapping, and while you can't really see it with the naked eye, I have actually changed the pitch of this voice over here. Basically what I did is that I held down Alt, which is the alternate snapping keyboard shortcut, which is to say that if there is snap, it will turn off snap, and if there is no snap, it'll turn on snap. So as there is snap, it turned off snap, and I moved it until it said up here 1%, although now it says 0%, and that's kind of interesting, because I could have sworn... Nope, I guess... That actually explains a lot, because this means that in the phase section, which I did change quite radically, and then I changed the panning, if they're not changing pitch, that means it'll be static panning phase difference, which I guess with the reverb appears not to matter. So I just don't do that. Yeah, it still sounds kind of... What I mean, some people prefer to have really big stereos. People prefer to have kind of mono. If you want the mono, get rid of that. And if you don't, keep it there. You can also push it. That's what I mean by a static bit. Because the pitch isn't different, it's gonna kind of lean one way or the other. And if I use the global pitch like this, it'll change everything, including the sub. And I didn't want to do that. That's why I was doing all this individual unison index mapping stuff with Citrus. I think that's actually everything. I mean, okay, I linked the bandpass cutoff to ModX, an extremely thin range. This is basically the range of the 500 hertz area for this note. And this is just because I wanted to make big, from 0 to 100 without having to worry about like the range. But if you wanted to play any other note, you would have to make this a larger range and then make a more precise movement on your automation clip. And that's fine, that's just a lot of work. You might notice in the original song, which I don't remember what it's called, that they really only did just play the one note. So that's what's up with that. I also have the volume of operator 1 all the way off when it's at the very bottom, because when it's on the very bottom, when it was still on, you could actually still hear a little bit of the harmonic. So I actually really only wanted it to be on when it was engaged beyond perfectly 0%. What else? This is the extra sub with that it's lower volume when it's lower Xmod value. This guy is actually a noise operator if you want to add a little bit of that in there. Similarly, it's controlled volume with the ModX so that it shuts up when it gets at low values. The saw wave also turns on and off based on ModX, which you could make, just to see how that affects the overall sound. What else? I really think I covered everything at this point. I turned off smooth editing. Okay. Now let's talk about the compressor. The compressor really is the only other thing in the chain. This EQ that I was using mostly to read it, but that's not there because I'm using the master for the moment. All right. The Maximus. So I'm not doing anything on the bass. It's kind of sticking there. I turn it down a little bit. That's pretty much it, though. On the mids, I have that set. So the mids it's like super duper specifically that section. So that is like really on point with compressing the kind of the main tone of the area. I'm doing this little funky business where like it's when it peaks, it's normal, but then when it gets down, it gets kind of pushed out. This is transient shaping. This is what transient shaping means. I turned off all the time variables so that all the snappiness is really snappy. And I turned down the delay variables, which is to say the attack and the actual thing to say delay, also on the master. The response or the release and the ahead are really small, which I'm sure is adding additional little harmonic saturation due to distortion, but that's not doing much. on the high frequency, this is what I meant by the reverb sounding crunchy. This is actually why, because I have this double curve setting here, which is to say that when the high frequencies are on, they're really on, and then when they get low, they get pushed off a bit faster. This is again transient shaping. However, it's reacting a bit slower than the rest of it because I have a really long release time. I didn't want to distort it so much. On the master, I have nothing at all. It's basically limiting, but really quickly. And I didn't want to go too far, because if I went too far, that happened. So I kind of wanted to keep it pretty clean. This is despite all the distortion involved, this is still a pretty clean sounding sound. So that's what I was trying to do with the compression. And of course, like a lot of how this sounded, like the real like snappiness was enhanced by the compression. But again, really without the compression, it just sounds kind of darker, and that can be solved with an equalizer. But I like how it sounds with the Maximus. I will have this project available for you to download in the description of this video. If you have any questions about this, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day.